because I had gotten into XRP from the geopolitical angle. And like, I knew there was crypto. I knew you could DeFi and do all those stuff. I didn't quite like know the ins and the outs of it. And they walked me through it. I moved over maybe about 2/3 of my XRP stash. Of those 2/3, half of it I kept in XRP, but I put it into a Venus vault with ACS on Advanced Crypto, or with ACS on the Binance Smart Chain. And the other half of those 2/3 I moved over, I turned into cake and a few other things to do yield farming. And I was very successful with the yield farming, but when it comes to crypto, I'm just, and I know how ridiculous this is, so I'm not trying to put myself on a pedestal here, but I'm so XRP oriented. And it got to the point where I didn't trust Binance. Not that I have any particular reason to distrust
Are you using cold storage?
Yes, I use a ledger.
Okay.
But the thing is that even though I was getting the gains and the yields, the cross rate between XRP and the cake and BNB, which were the two big things I was in at the time, it had gone down. So even though I had gone up in terms of earning in the native token, the exchange rate back to XRP had gone down. And so I really had to wait maybe about 4 or 5 months before the window opened for me to jump back into XRP. Now, when I jump back into XRP, it's fine. Remember when Gammon was talking about his real estate play in Colombia? And he said, well, listen, I kind of want to get the oil play. And if the peso is denominated, or if oil exports from Colombia will make the peso rise and fall, if I invest in real estate that's denominated in pesos, I can kind of get this tailwind. So it's kind of the same thing, although I had a headwind until the headwind reversed into a tailwind. So yeah. I'm sorry, that was a long-winded answer.
No. You got a real estate deal today?
That was yesterday. So yesterday we were selling off the single-family portfolio, or at least the vast majority of the single-family portfolio. Oh, we're down to a handful.
Are you selling them all off?
We are selling them all, save one that I'm holding back for personal use. And then there are two with leases that expire in 2022. And unless the residents wish to buy out the home or want an early out, they will stay in there until then. And when you look at what rents, speaking of inflation, not to wade into the deflation, inflation hornet's nest there, but these leases that they've signed at the old rates, I mean, even now I look at it and I'm like, wow, I thought I was, really, putting the heat on at the time when I was doing the lease renewals, but now it's like, oh no, these people got a deal. And the people who signed a 2-year lease, they got the best deal of all. So really? Very interesting. Yeah. Very interesting. Well, interesting, but anyways, enough bothering about that. From your perspective, Josh, I know yesterday we chit-chatted a little bit about crypto, and I'm always very curious to hear like your take, because you're smart enough and you've been close enough to see what's going on. You've owned a little bit yourself, but more so, I think, from the momentum viewpoint versus some bigger thesis or belief in an underlying project or whatnot. Curious to know what your thoughts are, if they've changed. Curious to know what your friends are doing. Are people still talking about Bitcoin, or did they go quiet, or are they suddenly starting to talk about Bitcoin again? It's price action.
I would not be surprised if we make new highs in Bitcoin. But I still think that there are weak hands to be shaken out, and the weak hands nearly always get shaken out. As we can see in the gold market right now, these bear markets that happen in anything, they are a lot more vicious than you can imagine. You know how many times these people have said, this is it, gold's going to start rallying now? No, it hasn't. And since it's been a full year, and I wouldn't be surprised if a few more months go by before the gold rally starts. Yeah, I don't know if this Bitcoin, say, crash is ongoing, but I think there will be at least a few more incredible buying opportunities, because the weak hands are not out. There are still believers, and those people will never sell. But I think there's a decent amount of quote unquote weak hands that if they can't stomach the volatility. Not many people can.
And so again, I don't mean to read minds, but would that be correct to say, Josh, that if these weak hands can't stomach the volatility, someone like you will be there to relieve them of their burden
Yeah,
when the
exactly.
time
And
comes.
right now, I have no position in cryptos, and I am not interested in. Honestly, Justin has me hooked. The first crypto I'm going to get is XRP when I think.
Don't say that. Don't say that. Dislike. This is going so many
I'm going to
bad
Gucci your trade bad. If I'm in on XRP, then everyone else has to get out because it's going down for sure.
We're not sharing. No, yeah. Fair enough. Fair enough.
But I could be wrong, and I probably am. Bitcoin probably going to go to the moon straight up from now, and there'll never be another good buying opportunity ever again. But if I'm not wrong, and I just think there's so many potential risks. Let's say Tether. Tether has not gone up. The inflows in Tether have stayed stagnant for the past few months, while the price of Bitcoin have started rising. And I was looking at the fear and greed index today, and there's not extreme greed, but it's getting damn near extreme greed. Not as much as it was. The headlines, you're not seeing headlines every day for Bitcoin, at least not like we were. If anything, it seems to be more negative sentiment in the news as of right now, which I like to see. But I'm not a buyer right now. And I think if I let's say if I had to speculate, I would say for the next few months, the price of Bitcoin would go up. But I'm just not interested in that trade right now.
One of the graphs I need to find, and I don't like it as much as my precious monetary pyramid graph, but it's up there. It's up there. Is the overlay of Tether printing with the price of Bitcoin?
Yeah,
because with the price of Bitcoin goes the entire crypto market.
But right now, the Tether was going up. It's been a flat line for the past few months, and while Bitcoin just started to rally again.
Yeah.
If we see outflows of Tether, though, I think that's a completely different story, and that could start a mass spiral downwards.
So I don't disagree with that, but here's the. I mean, not to get off on a complete Tether tangent, but like, I don't actually know how one can redeem tethers for dollars, and I do you know how poorly the euro? You know, Snyder talking about how poorly the euro-dollar market is understood.
Yeah, tethers.
But like on crypto, so like magnified and exponentially, I think is how poorly the effect of Tether is understood on that. Maybe one of the questions for Roberto to ask is to talk about there's a graphic, maybe I've shared it with you, showing the amount of exchange volume that's being funded by Tether. And as long as people equate, and see, this gets back to one of these core problems. People equate a Tether with a dollar, with a USDC or whatnot. And maybe it is, maybe it isn't. And really, I guess, and as Gammon would say, the only thing that matters is people's belief that it exists. But sooner or later, if that belief changes, even if there's no real reason for it to change, then you're going to have movement in the market. But this is the other thing I want to go back to, is that when people, for the crypto guys, same thing for I think I said this yesterday, same for the precious metal guys, when they go on a rant saying, oh my God, silver got smashed down, gold got smashed, XRP got smashed down or whatnot. If you really believe in what you're doing, you would just simply view that. I mean, this is Rick Rule saying it, right? This Rule makes this point often. It just means it's gone on sale. Buy more of it. And the fact that people are denominating their success in dollars when they're trying to get out of the dollar market to begin with, it's just, I don't know.
As of now, I think to be out of the dollar, you still need. You're like, what are your monthly expenses in? If your monthly expenses are in dollars, then you still need dollars.
Oh, very true, very true. Yeah, like as Jesus said, render unto Caesar what is Caesar. So I'm not trying to.
I love shipping, and I love it a little too much.
Oh, speaking of, let's go into shipping, because the other day we were going to start talking about shipping, but we got sidetracked on something. Josh, show me on shipping.
There's just as Rick, do you love your Rick Rule quotes? Bear markets are the author of bull markets, and bull markets are the author of bear markets. The harder, the last bull market in shipping was in 2009, and since then there's been massive underfunding for the past 10 years.
Just a quick question. When you say underfunding, is that to say you have a very intensive CapEx industry that hasn't had CapEx invested in it, so it's been coasting on?
Yeah, and all right now, let's say a container ship lasts 30, 40 years, we're getting to where those ships are, that they need to be replaced, and there's no new ships to replace them. Along with the shipping industry, I think, would have performed extremely well over the next 10 years due to that fact. But COVID just took it to a whole new level. They're now with the COVID restrictions, these ships, they cannot move freely. They have so many regulations. They have to go to a port. They have to take like a week to like deload safely, and all other ships, they are just waiting in the water. Like they're just sitting around waiting for another ship to load, and then they're just going to repeat. And what used to happen, and what should happen, is a ship comes, they deload, and then all the U.S. imports come in, and then the ship takes those imports and exports them. But it's not even worth their time right now. They don't want to wait for those imports to get on the boat because they can make more money getting back home to bring stuff back over. And along with that, so these ships cannot go onto the shore. There's the cap. I mean the shipping index. This is the worst season for shipping of all time. I mean, there's just seasonality, worst time, but we're hitting new all-time highs every day, and I think that will continue because there's no supply. It's a lot harder to make a giant ship than it is to get more Uber drivers.
So what I hear you saying in that front is that the capacity of the shipping industry is being artificially constrained by regulation, policies, procedures, or just by
and if you look at the cash flows, these things are just pumping fucking cash, like absolutely pumping cash, and they're going to continue to do so because because they need more supply. They need more supply, but it's not yet coming. So the price of actually bringing goods and services, whatever it's called, like the shipping index, is going to continue to go up until new supply comes on. But it takes so much longer to actually build these ships than people realize, and they're not being funded.
In the real estate world, at least in Houston, it generally takes about 3 years from a project being greenlit to the first unit being leased or whatnot. And so generally what's happened in the past that you have this huge mismatch between the capex, people building an apartment complex when there's not enough supply, but when 3 years go by and the apartment's finally coming online, the market's crashed. Mm-hmm. So it's very interesting, that dynamic. Just let me ask a follow-up question to that. Do you see what would happen if suddenly somebody waved the magic wand, they develop the cure for, I doubt this will happen, but, thought experiment. They develop the cure for COVID, and all of a sudden, overnight, it goes away. And all the restrictions.
Do you think that would happen? Yesterday, China just closed a port, or they did something with a port to where ships could not come on, or they could not leave. And that is thousands of goods that are no longer coming on, which means we're going to pay more for those goods from someone else. And that means the ship they're going to say, all right, you're going to have to pay me a little more.
So let me ask a question slightly different way. If you see I hate to use the word because it's one of those bullshit buzzwordy words, but a paradigm shift away from outsourcing to insourcing. So, for example, let's say in the United States, and perhaps maybe
that's going to take much, much longer, right? Like we don't produce stuff. I don't think we can just flick on the light and just start producing goods again. And if we do, great. But how long is that going to take? 5 years minimum?
Well, maybe the response to that would be, let's say that, God forbid, and of course nobody would want this to happen, there's some major event that just takes the majority of China offline. I don't know, the Three Gorges Dam suddenly collapses, and, just the entire Pearl River Delta is just obliterated. Point is, China ain't going to be making anything for the next 100 years, except misery and sorrow. Anyways.
I think the prices of goods would go up because there's less goods, and that means there's less supply.
I would agree with that. I would also add this to it as well, is that if something like that were to happen from the American perspective, I think there'd be a lot of short-term pain because all of these supplies suddenly go offline. But that would also be the kick in the ass to really rethink our side. And so let's say it takes that 5-year period, but within that 5-year period, we're able to get our manufacturing back online. And let's say when our manufacturing comes back online, the industrial plant is rebuilt. So it's highly automated, needs less labor, very efficient. I would say, to my own question and response, is it is true, Justin, the US or these shipping companies might not be making money from taking stuff from abroad to the United States, but in this situation, they would be making their money instead from taking stuff from the United States to the rest of the world. That might be
And
the
either way,
answer.
that just takes time. Right now, there's just simply not enough supply of ships. And if there's not enough ships, then there's they're just going to continue to make money until it incentivizes these companies to make more ships, which would increase demand, which would bring down their profits.
Well, I can definitely tell you this, Josh. Depending upon what happens in the crypto market, silver market, GME,
they might be making one more for you.
Yeah, although I don't necessarily know if I talked to a tanking company. Ocean Co is the company that's on my excuse me, on my radar for that. They've got quite a pedigree of doing these ridiculous testaments to indulgences. But anyways, okay, very interesting. One other thing too, from a geopolitical angle, this gets back into one of my favorite authors, George Friedman, talking about it. He makes the comment that after the American Civil War, and this is where it gets into the monetary policy as well as the physical or the industrial physical plant coming into focus here. You had in America that was just starting to rebuild its industrial plant. So it's like 1880, 1890, the age of the robber barons or whatnot. But when World War I rolled around, the American industrial plant was brand new at the time, and it was really kicking ass. We could really punch above our weight, and we did punch above our weight. But when World War I happens, the net effect of that is it destroyed customers. And the American industrial plant required customers to export to. And so at the end of World War I, and this is getting into the era of the Depression, you had this massive capacity, but no one to sell to. Now, they tried a few programs, the New Deal or whatever, but ultimately it was World War II that restored and brought back the customer base, through the war effort that basically got us America out of the Depression through this, massive uptick in demand. But here's where it gets interesting. So after World War II happens, we go through and we rebuild the industrial plant of Japan and we rebuild the industrial plant of Germany. Now just think about that for 1 second. These were our enemies in World War II. And one of the first things we do from a geopolitical angle is we go back and we rebuild their economy. And not only do we rebuild their economy,
were the banks loaning them?
Us? No. Well, the banks were loaning, but it was state policy. The banks are kind of being told, you will lend. So this would be like the Marshall Plan in Germany going through. Because the big picture was this.
Why do you think that was?
Oh, because they had to contain the Soviets. So in the case of Germany, the US realized that we had to make an alliance between Germany and France, who had just been at each other's throats. And what's more, we have to get the German economy up and running to the point where they have the ability to resist the USSR. At the time. So this is, all the spy movies, all the James Bond movies, all the Jean Le Carre books and whatnot. This is what's framing it. This is the beginning of the Cold War right here. Same thing in Japan. We need to go over and we basically need to teach Toyota how to build cars and all this other stuff. And so what happened is that the Europe industrial plant, or the German industrial plant, I should say, and the Japanese industrial plant, they were kickstarted after World War II because America was very much interested in its own interests. And I thought, well, listen, if we can build up these two former enemies into allies, and these people can kind of soak up any aggression that comes, this is very much in our interest. But then the problem was in the 70s and the 80s, those industrial plants, essentially brand new, or not brand new, but much more advanced than the American industrial plant, which was built at, like, say, the 1900s to the 1920s. Therefore, we had to start exporting a bunch of stuff. Or excuse me, we started importing a bunch of stuff because the foreign guys could do it cheaper. But circa around 1970s, particularly 1971, what happens? We start going off. This is when you see the Eurodollars really, really, really cranking up. And I find it very interesting that you had the Eurodollar explosion at the same time America had outsourced, or it was starting to use the more efficient industrial plant of the Germans and of the Japanese or whatnot. Because it was one of these weird things where it's like you have these two different worlds that almost conspired together, right? Anyways, fast forward all the way through the 80s, 90s, and then you get Trump or whatnot, right? You have the Rust Belt that's languished. You have GM and, the traditional American factories, shutting down or whatnot. And what's Trump always bitching, or what was Trump always bitching about? The dollar's too strong. The dollar's too strong. The dollar's too strong. What's Brent Johnson always saying? What's going to happen first before the thing goes to hell? The dollar milkshake, it's going to suck everything back in. Mm-hmm. So my suspicion from all of this, from the geopolitical angle, is that when you get to the next event, whenever that is, again, to a quote Brent Johnson in this regard, inevitable does not mean imminent. So that's kind of the thing on that front. But I do think one of the trends of the next era is going to be a trend that has American manufacturing, probably highly automated and highly efficient, getting back to where it was in the world.
I agree
circa
with
like
you.
1900 or whatever.
As long as Klaus Schwab's dream does not come true. And unless we say go down this socialist communist way, then I think I think it would be more of how South Africa looks right now. Then, I mean, if we have the first turning and we get back to our power, the American powerhouse, which would be the absolute ideal situation, then I think that would play out pretty much perfectly. But if we see the other side of the coin and we go down this road to serfdom, I think it will get really, really ugly.
Sooner or later, we will all have to make a choice, both on the individual level and on the big level, or I should say both on the micro level and on the macro level. And I think when people think about it, the truth is self-evident. But this is a problem to the elites because, or rephrase that. I think the only way that
people no longer want to make hard decisions. They are scared of the tough choice. And as George Gavinow says to you, how many lives is it worth per so let's say lockdown, locking people down in their homes saves one life. Is that worth it? Or how many lives does it have to save for it to be worth it? And then you say, oh, every life is worth it. But then you have to say, how many deaths is it going to cause locking people in their home and do a real cost-benefit analysis? And people don't want to think hard. They don't want to make a difficult decision. They're fucking pussies.
I love it when I lie to me. So they do. They do.
What the fuck?
Well, yeah, what I will say is this. Only at the brink do people find the will to change.
Mm-hmm.
It gets back to Minerva's owl. If people can see Minerva's owl before the sun sets, they might have a chance. But if the sun sets, and only then do they see it,
yeah,
there's that.
That's
an optimistic Saturday night, isn't it? So.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. I mean, it just seems like that it seems ever so more likely every day that it will be too late and the Minerva's owl is already set at dawn or whatever the fuck it goes.
Dusk. I think maybe this is one way to think about it. Like, if you can get enough of the there's this concept called the silent majority. And right now, the left, more so than the right, and is really being, or is currently winning the obnoxious battle. And I think that the more obnoxious they are, the more people get turned off. Like, imagine someone like Gammon before he was that. Like, he might understand, okay, well, look, I know there's this political realm, and like, yeah, I know it's probably important, but like, look, at the end of the day, I'm an entrepreneur or whatever, right? And like, I just want to focus on my business, focus on making money or whatever. And more power to someone like that. But until they actually can connect the dots of how this is important and why they need to spend the time, money, resources, whatever, to go after that, they're not going to care. And that's Minerva's owl, right? That they have to be able to see why it's important, or perhaps maybe just have a little bit of a pain to make the connection, but not to the point where the pain kills the person or where the damage is too far done where it can't be undone. So,
all right, well, we'll end on that happy note.